Moving on to the rebuilding of Solomon's temple and the tremendous symbolic value of this kind of lunatic adventurism in forming the Frankenstein state of Israel. My last video was on the ridiculous belief system associated with British Israelism, and hoping that article made it abundantly clear where all this insanity is coming from, and how you possibly drum up this kind of lunatic, fanatic support for what is ultimately a cynical imperialist project by taking advantage of people who are inclined or vulnerable in some part of their psyches to religious manipulation. So here, moving on, this has to do with the rebuilding of Solomon's temple and the way that this formed a kind of rationale for British imperialist seizure of Palestine, and this going back to the 19th century, going back to the 1840s, 50s, and 60s, and later, but starting at that time. This article is from October 19th, 1990, Executive Intelligence Review, British Freemasons, and the Temple Mount by Joseph Bruda. In our 26th of April 1983 cover story, Temple Mount Fundamentalists Launching New Middle East Holy Wars, EIR identified the controllers of the Temple Mount cultists up to the highest reaches of British intelligence and Freemasonry. Quote, "The operation is not being conducted through official channels of the British parliamentary government," we wrote, "but through the lodges of Scottish Rite Freemasonry, the principal secret society of elite figures in the royal household, Church of England, and Secret Intelligence Service. The monarchist Freemasonic lodges, in particular the Quatuor Coronati Lodge, have arranged an alliance between U.S.-based Armageddon fundamentalists and fanatical Zionist sects in Israel, both being run by British intelligence. A next phase role is being readied for British assets among Islamic fundamentalists, which I will get into next time. The British Freemasonic subversion of Islam. But going back to, I remember my grandparents were Mormons, and at one time they went to Israel, and they were very much on board with this, these crazy beliefs. Otherwise, wonderful people. But the Quatuor Coronati Lodge, there's a really great lecture given by Anton Chaitkin. It's on YouTube, where he goes into the creation of the Quatuor Coronati Lodge. This Quatuor Coronati means the four crowned ones, and it was developed in the 1860s by this very bizarre British character, Sir Charles Warren, and it was in 1868, and he was the leader of the Palestine Exploration Fund, which was begun shortly after Lord Palmerston wrote a letter in 1840 to David Urquhart, who was the British ambassador to the Ottoman Empire, and he was Lord Palmerston. Lord Palmerston was like the top oligarch in Britain. And in 1840, he wrote this letter that articulates the basic idea behind the creation of Israel in securing this very strategically important territory, securing the trade routes to India, and the strategically very important nexus point between Asia, Africa, and Europe. And you had the Palestine Exploration Fund set up by Queen Victoria and the United Grand Lodge of Masons, and they went in to Palestine to ostensibly, they were, establishing a foothold in Palestine that would later then would become a military occupation, but originally it was to excavate, to explore, to look for ruins that might be important to the Masonic cause, and working toward, the story was having to do with restoring the Temple of Solomon, and then bringing about the end times, Armageddon. Yeah. What a great thing to look forward to. And Sir Charles Warren wrote several books. One was called Underground Jerusalem. One was called Temple or the Tomb. And he writes in 1878, I'm quoting now, but this is from Anton Chaitkin's incredible lecture. He said, proposing the colonization of that part of the Ottoman Empire called Palestine in exchange for taking over Turkish debt. And he writes, quote, let this be done with the avowed intention of gradually introducing the Jew, pure and simple, who is eventually to colonize and govern this country. It is written over and over again in the Word of God. The children of Israel are to return to their own land. Sir Charles Warren was a British Army engineer. He was a really bad character. He went to South Africa and was involved in killing the indigenous people there and killing some of the Boers as well. And then he goes back to London and he starts this Quatuor Coronati Lodge, which is a Freemasonic research lodge. And Anton Chaitkin notes that he was also the police commissioner involved in the cover-up of the Jack the Ripper scandal, where one of Queen Victoria's grandsons had gotten involved with the wrong woman. It had to be covered up. She was whisked off to an insane asylum, and the witnesses were killed, but in the most gruesome, sort of satanic, Freemasonic, gruesome way, where there was Freemasonic symbols carved into their bodies, and this was then it was spun in the press as the work of a lone lunatic that was called Jack the Ripper. But Prince Eddie was remains actually the prime suspect, and Charles Warren was involved in covering that up. So among the other kinds of atrocities that this guy is connected with, you also had the Quatuor Coronati involved in developing theosophy, spreading astrology into France and Germany in the 1890s, which had, I guess, not been. It had been centuries since astrology had adherents in Central Europe. It had gone by the wayside, and they were very proud of having revived this form of irrationalism. And political Zionism, this Quatuor Coronati was perhaps the premier incubator for this movement. And then also later you had the Order of the Golden Dawn, and Aleister Crowley, who was part of this and was then, I guess you could say, he was deployed to Hollywood to help set up the movie business there. So the you also had then the creation of the Tula Society spinning off of this group, and as well as spreading irrationalist perversions, I guess, of Islam in the form of Sufism. And then you had Sabattendorf creating the Tula Society. All of this is being done by the British. So this was, which of course then you have Nazism coming out of that. So all of this is coming out of the Quatuor Coronati Lodge. Let's see here. A next phase role is being readied for British assets among Islamic fundamentalists. Quote, the basis for the alliance of professed Christians and Jews is a shared anti-Judaical form of pre-Christian belief structure converging on the pagan Hermeticist castration dogmas of Scottish Rite Freemasonry itself. This has been applied to produce an agreed-upon pagan interpretation of Old Testament prophecy. One result is a shared venture to rebuild the Temple of Solomon on the site, the Temple Mount, which it is presumed to have occupied during the 9th century BC in Jerusalem. In fostering the Temple Mount operation, the Freemasonic monarchists of the United Kingdom are engaged in a geopolitical power play of major proportions under the cover that religious fanaticism provides. Like certain Soviet strategic planners, British monarchists desire neither sovereign nation states in the Middle East nor a United States of America with the power, independence, and sovereignty to do its will in world affairs. From their standpoint, the Temple Mount operation might eliminate both. Certainly, as you look at the atrocities being committed today in Gaza by these Zionists who have probably gotten more insane, if anything, you see the sort of the teetering of American politics. Just absolutely, people have absolutely gone insane with this stuff. I literally can't believe it. I posted something on Facebook today. I was like, I can't believe I retained my citizenship. I mean, these people have gone absolutely bonkers. It's beyond disgusting. But you see in other sorts of plans being drawn up on the continent of Europe, as well as being perhaps partially sponsored by the British oligarchy, but this idea that the United States could be sacrificed because of the continuing ongoing epistemological threat that the identity of the United States still poses to this wing of European aristocracy that absolutely has been dead set against sovereign nation states going back to the time of Louis XI. So, as I look at the United States now, it really, to me, looks like it's tottering on the brink. But anyway, let's go on. The Quatuor Coronati Lodge, next section. The Temple Mount agents provocateurs are not ultimately controlled by Israeli intelligence, although two active duty Israeli intelligence officers, Mattiyahu Dan and Rabbi Shlomo Aviner, lead the sects. I'm sure I mispronounced those names. They are run by the Quatuor Coronati Freemasonic Lodge of London, formerly headed by the Duke of Kent. The lodge, formed in the 1860s, has always been one of the main patrons of the Zionist movement. It was formed as a result of an 1862 trip by Edward, then Prince of Wales, Prince Eddie, to the Holy Land, where the policy of seizing Palestine as a means of protecting the route to British India was adopted. Zionism has functioned as a cynical cover for that imperialist objective, which is my main thesis, which is what I'm hoping to drive home to anyone who will listen. And we need to get this information out there, because right now it's really urgent that we direct our opprobrium and our outrage at the proper target, at where this has all been coming from, and not get distracted by the false choice we've been given, choosing sides between the state of Israel or Hamas. Hamas was created by MI6. It's created by, indirectly MI6 through Mossad. I mean, anybody who knows anything knows this. This whole thing has been engineered and wound up and detonated by British intelligence going back as far as 1840. So going on, in 1967, the Quatuor Coronati Lodge dispatched Dr. Asher Kaufman to Jerusalem to oversee its project of rebuilding the temple. The project has become timely due to Israel's seizure that year of East Jerusalem, where the Temple Mount is located. At around the same time, Biblical Archaeological Review, an American-based mouthpiece of the Lodge, began a series of articles popularizing the project, particularly among American Protestant fundamentalists. The review was edited for a time by Barbara Ladid, wife of the U.S. State Department's premier terrorism expert, right? Michael Ladid, who later became notorious as a main intermediary between the Reagan-Bush White House and the Israeli government in the Iran-Contra deals. He was also front and center in the Gladio operations in the heart of Europe, in Italy specifically. He was caught up with the P2 Freemasonic Lodge and in the deployment of Gladio and red and black terror to prevent Italy from becoming a truly independent sovereign nation that was spreading, that was in a position at that time, during the time, we're going back to Aldo Moro, who was killed in this, actually, 1978. Italy was sort of taking steps in a new direction that would have led to the development of the Middle East, which was something that the interests behind people like Michael Ladin absolutely forbid. And they absolutely can't allow this to happen. And this is, Aldo Moro's death. Much earlier, you had JFK. For the same reasons, that he was a pro-development, anti-imperialist. But anyway, let's go on. The Masonic secret agenda. The use of religious warfare as a variant of the imperial technique of divide and conquer is not the only reason for the British patronage of this strange project. There are compelling British cult reasons as well. For historical reasons, all Christian holy sites in Jerusalem have always been under the control of the Greek Orthodox Church, Orthodoxy generally, or the Roman Catholic Church. The Protestant denominations, including the Anglican Church, were formed several hundred years too late to control any of the holy sites. The Anglican Church, whose head is the British monarch, has become heavily influenced by the Masonic beliefs of many leading British families. There has been a decades-long secret understanding between the Zionists and the Anglican Church that Orthodox and Catholic control of Jerusalem's holy sites would eventually come to an end. This is among the cult reasons why the British supported the creation of Israel in the first place. It is also a major reason why Great Britain supported Israel's 1967 seizure of East Jerusalem, the location of many of the city's most important religious sites. Last spring, the Temple Mount fanatics took over a Greek-administered site adjacent to the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, signaling that a major new assault on Jerusalem's Christians had begun. The Jewish fundamentalists' patrons have also been quietly buying up vast tracts of land in the Christian quarter of the city. They are committed to making Jerusalem Muslim-free. According to one scenario, the Israeli government, which supports these projects, will now use the developing religious violence as a pretext to put every holy site in the city, whatever the denomination, under the control of its Ministry of Religious Affairs.